Hello, Realtors. Welcome back to GADcast, brought to you by the North Shore-Barrington Association of Realtors. My name's Joe Roth, and I'm your local government affairs director here at NSBAR. This week, we're going to continue our candidate conversations, highlighting those candidates that our PAC is supporting. And this week, we have a very special guest, Alderman Tom Suffredin from Evanston. He's been an alderman for one term and up for re-election this April. So let's get started. Tom, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. It's great to be here, man. It's great to be here.
So you're up for re-election. You've got a term under your belt as an alderman. Tell us a little bit. What's that first term been like for you?
It's been interesting, man. We're closing it up strong. We're trying to tie up loose ends for the next mayor and council. We have a interesting bifurcated election system this year. So the primary in 2 wards is on Tuesday, and for mayor and clerk. So if we get a candidate who gets 50% for mayor, we'll know who our next mayor is in February for swearing in May. So right now we're focused really on a few loose ends, and I think the next council is going to have the responsibility to fix some of the things that we didn't get right. And so that's something that I'm focused on as I power through this campaign. But first term was good. It was good. Looking forward to the next one if I'm invited back to my constituents.
Any highlights on some of those key issues for a second term?
Yeah, well, I think we really got to focus on revitalizing our downtown business district, and we have a Main Street business district and a Central Street business district on the north and southeast parts of town that we need to focus on supporting as we move out of COVID and find out exactly what that means for people's work patterns, figuring out the right mix of housing and offices, and really like the big thing that we need to do in terms of recovery, which isn't unique to Evanston, is be as supportive as we can of people who want to invest in real estate or businesses here, and really try and make sure that we do the things that need to get done to attract and retain residents and businesses. That's the focus, and we'll see how it all lays out when we get to the next term.
Sure. And so I want to talk about, a few months ago, City Council was looking at the budget, and there was a proposal for a property tax increase of nearly 6%. But you in particular, you took a really strong stand on that. You pushed back hard. And we ended up with it was right around 1%, I think, that increase. Talk to us a little bit about why you felt so strong to push back on this, proposal.
Yeah, sure. So, and I'm glad that we were able to chip away at it, and I wish we would have gotten it to 0, but I'm appreciative of my colleagues who agreed with me that we needed to dial it down. I thought, raising property taxes on people in this environment during a pandemic was really tough to defend. Particularly, our reason for wanting to raise the tax was to boost our reserves, to look better to bond rating agencies to allow us to borrow in the future. And it just didn't make sense to take money out of households and businesses and put it on the shelf to make ourselves look more attractive to bond houses in a time where people are in a really bad crisis. I have gotten more emails, people really fearful of their economic situation in the last year than I did in the first 3 years. And obviously that's COVID related, but it demonstrates, how vulnerable people are and didn't realize they were a year ago. And so I just thought that raising property taxes on them in this environment was not acceptable. Unfortunately, our school districts didn't necessarily agree, so there's still a hit on the tax bill for Evanston taxpayers. But I take my responsibility to be a good steward of taxpayer money very seriously, and it just didn't seem like it was worth it to put people's household budgets through that strain for purposes of appearing more appealing to rating agencies for purposes of later borrowing. So we got it done, more or less.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think homeowners are such an important part of the community that's, I mean, that makes sense, that you push back on those things. It's completely logical to us. But going into taxes a little bit, and you and I have talked about this extensively, is transfer taxes. And, obviously we have a strong opposition to transfer taxes. While they were originally created to cover the cost of, recording a transaction, and basically they were an appropriate tax to cover that cost, but they've evolved and changed. And now with the graduated transfer tax that's in place in Evanston, basically we have a program set up where you purchase a property, you invest in the community, you pay property tax bills throughout the course of your ownership. And then when you're leaving, oh, by the way, we're going to take a little bit more from you, and especially targeting those businesses and commercial properties where you need the activity right now. So talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on transfer taxes and what you think about those.
Sure, and for everyone who's watching who isn't aware, the reason we talked about it so much is I just closed on a condo sale. My wife and I, the condo we lived in before our family outgrew it, we had it as a rental property, and we just closed that sale yesterday. And so it gave me an opportunity to be on the shopping side of the counter with Evanston's transfer tax procedures, which are not as efficient as they could be. I mean, there's the issue of whether we should have a transfer tax at all, whether it should be graduated the way that some of my colleagues have been very proud about having a graduated transfer tax in Evanston. And then my issue, aside from the whether we should have it, whether it should be graduated, is if we're going to have it, we should have the process be as efficient as possible. And unfortunately, it is not. And so I found myself in a situation where my $1,100 in transfer taxes were being held up until I paid another $20 in a fee that I don't think that I really owed. But what am I going to do at this point? Hold up an entire transaction over $20? And I think it's just bad business for a city to not have a streamlined process. You should be able to get that transaction done as painlessly as possible, setting aside whether or not the transaction should exist. And so I think our reliance on transfer taxes demonstrates our city's unfortunate pattern of using fees in ways they weren't originally intended and then growing them in ways that aren't sustainable. I think we lose out on potential residents and current residents who don't purchase a second home in Evanston because they find themselves really burdened by taxes and fees. And that doesn't even touch like building permits, vehicle registration, a lot of things that we do that people feel, really are nickel and diming them, but not nickel and diming, like 10 and 20ing them. So the transfer tax issue is one that I am keenly aware of. I realize ideally we would dial it back, but at the bare minimum, we could at least have a streamlined process that doesn't hold up transactions, because that hurts everybody on all sides of the transaction. And it's ultimately for a buyer, if your first experience with that government is your real estate closing being held up because of a erroneous fee holding up transfer stamps, that just sort of sets the stage for a lot of negative interactions with the city that you'll have forthcoming. And so we need to do better. And I'm really curious about what communities do it best, or what communities have had transfer taxes and dialed them back. Is that something that happens anywhere in your jurisdiction? Have you seen anybody take transfer taxes? Do the transfer taxes ever move backwards, or is it just like every other tax and it always escalates?
Yeah, usually, you're correct there. Usually it's an escalating thing, right? Although the voters do need to approve that, which I think is a good safeguard. But we have seen some towns that have taken a bit of a unique approach. I've seen some towns where an existing someone selling a home in town, if they're buying another property in town, will be rebated a portion of that transfer tax. So there is some different creative ways. But generally speaking, we see the best and easiest are, you hand a check, they hand a series of stamps. That's those are the best and easiest.
Yeah, and that would be ideal. And that's one of the things as we get back to whatever normal will be after this, is how can we streamline that process? Because one of our issues is we have everybody at the collector's office at the same counter. So you are in line behind somebody paying a $28 water bill if you want to buy $3,200 worth of transfer stamps. And I don't think you want to, but if you're in a situation where you are buying. So we maybe there's ways we can streamline that process. We can streamline the review process, because it's a double whammy when you're paying for something that you probably don't feel you should be paying for anyway, and it's eating up a lot of your time because it's a bad and inefficient process.
That makes perfect sense. I think efficiency is always beneficial for everyone.
Yeah, and you raise a good point with the swap there too, because that's another thing that I've brought up a lot in my first term, and I hope to have an opportunity to bring up in my second term. Is we are sometimes short-sighted on our fees, right? Like we charge for parking downtown because we want the parking fee, but we don't take into account how much sales tax revenue we're losing in exchange for the charging hourly for parking. And if we could find a way to move parking to a rebate structure, so it'd be supportive of businesses. If you spend this amount of money, your parking is free. That may be something that we can do where we still realize revenue as a city. We're more supportive of businesses, and we encourage people to come downtown or places where we charge for parking, which have expanded all throughout the city, because that's a real issue of convenience, and another one where we fall out of line with some of our peer communities farther north, where they don't charge for parking. And our argument is always, well, we're cheaper than Chicago, but we need to look at where the cross shopping is happening and figure out ways to capture consumer dollars in Evanston that go to Skokie, Wilmette, or Glenview on a regular basis.
No, that's definitely good thought.
And I know parking enforcement, sorry, but I also know that realtors are always subject to unwanted parking tickets just by the nature of their work. And that's something that we need to work on too, is a lot of people feel our enforcement is predatory, and it leaves people with bad feelings about Evanston when they're here for visits, whether it's for work or recreation.
I'll share that 2020 was the very first year since 2007 where I did not get a single parking ticket in Evanston. So that was one of my achievements out of the pandemic, is not getting.
Yeah, we had you budgeted for several, so that's part of the reason why they tried to lean on that real estate tax. But I think that's another thing we need to be more realistic about, is do we want ticket revenue or do we want tax and business revenue? And we gotta understand that there's a balance that needs to be struck there, because people who work, particularly restaurant owners, tell me all the time about how much energy they put into making sure there's a good customer experience inside of their restaurant, again, during more normal times. But now it's the same thing with takeout, and how that's completely erased if somebody gets a parking ticket on their way out the door. And so they've lost a future customer through no fault of their own. And we've got somebody who's not going to choose an Evanston business next time. They're going to go to Wilmette or Old Orchard for dinner and shopping. And that's a problem that we need to address.
Well, and I think that goes along with, something else you've talked a bit about, which is transparency. Is there anything in particular there you'd like to see out of city government when it comes to transparency? Yeah,
so there are several things. We've had in the last 4 years a real increase in Freedom of Information Act requests. And if you look through the requests, a lot of times they're very specific, and they're not something that we could just have publicly available at all times. You'll see it a lot with purchases of property where people want to know if there's ever been a heating oil tank or those types of FOIA requests, and that's information that we wouldn't have on the website at all times. But a lot of the other ones that relate to police and fire statistics, budget issues, we can do a better job of having them accessible on the website. generally the city has a lot of information available, but maybe it's not organized in the most efficient way. Another thing that we do a good job with, but could probably improve because there's so much information there, is like through the water department, you're able to look up, for example, whether your service line is lead or copper, when it was replaced, when your sewer connection was last replaced, and that's an issue that's come up. We have aging infrastructure in Evanston, and we're behind on replacing things, and a lot of things don't get replaced until they break. One of those, unfortunately, for homeowners who find themselves on the wrong side of this is sewer connections, and their homeowners will get caught by surprise with how much it costs them to replace their sewer, and also they don't realize they're responsible for the connection that is often out in the street. So we can do a better job of making sure people know the age of the infrastructure around their house, and they can budget and make decisions about their home maintenance and their inspection process when they're purchasing, based on the likelihood of them having to face these repair bills, because they can be substantial. And as I've learned from residents, when your sewer connection goes bad, you don't have an option to delay it. So we can do a better job of getting information to people, but I think there's a commitment from the city management structure to do better. And I think, figuring out ways to do that and resources to facilitate that are going to be a job for the next city council as well.
No, that's great information. And, I appreciate how you see the homeowner's perspective here.
I'm living it, man. I'm living it.
But I think it's also easy.
Yeah.
Right? It's easy to kind of get lost in all that when you're entrenched in the policies and the conversation. It's kind of easy to lose sight of that. And I appreciate that you don't lose sight of those homeowners and those people that make the community what it is.
Well, and I mean, that's really one of the things, with Evanston, and we do have high purchase prices on houses. And, I think that's, if you're someone who's selling a house, that's a great thing, but these houses are old. The infrastructure around them is old. So, when you purchase a house in Evanston, you're likely to face maintenance and repair costs that if you weren't budgeting or expecting can be a real problem for you. And that's another reason why I feel like raising real estate taxes it wasn't an acceptable alternative. We have a lot in my part of town, a lot of unpaved alleys. We have high clay soil. I think everyone's a little bit nervous about what's going to happen on our first warm day around here in their basements and with their potential ice dams. Ideally we'll get a gradual thawing and our sewers will be able to handle it, but nobody knows how that's going to shake out. We can really put some thought and energy in how we make Evanston a better place to live, acknowledging that we have these older homes. We have smaller homes, that if you look at other communities, homes of that size have been replaced by much larger new construction. How do we support residents who are in those homes who don't necessarily meet any of our low income thresholds, but do get stuck with tree root issues and all the things that come with living in a place like this. We don't have paved alleys in a lot of my part of town. We have incomplete sidewalks. The places where we do have sidewalks, some are in poor condition, but we do a 50-50 program with a homeowner, and I can see why that is not a priority spend for a homeowner. So there's things we can do to make Evanston more hospitable, because we need to acknowledge that we are competing with other communities in terms of basic quality of life and service, providing services. So we need to focus on that a little bit better.
No, that's fair. And you hit on something there with the lower income housing and those kind of transitioning over to affordable housing. And I think it's such a big nuanced conversation, right? And I think we all support affordable housing. I think we have some disagreements on details, but because that's really where, for us, that's where the rubber meets the road. But one of the really great policies that you guys recently enacted was allowing accessory dwelling units by right. And we take the opinion that that's a great way to increase affordable units, whether it's, the grandma's now living in that unit instead of taking up a spot at a 55 plus community or an affordable unit for seniors, or if it's directly, rented out as affordable. We think those are great. Can you talk a little bit about the new ADU stuff in Evanston?
Yeah, sure, Joe. In my part of town, which is Northwest Evanston, the only way that we're really going to be able to increase affordable housing is through accessory dwelling units. And so, finding a way to incentivize people to build them, and if we can, the infrastructure issues I was talking about, if we can find ways, for example, if so many homes on an alley agree to have affordable accessory dwelling units for a period of time, like that alley gets moved to the top of the paving list. Find ways to incentivize people to do it. I mean, I think for a lot of people, depending on their family situations, multi-generational situations, accessory dwelling units make a lot of sense for themselves. I think one of the post-COVID things that we're all going to see is sort of increased work from home, but that might not necessarily mean inside of your home, just on your property. And I think that's another thing that we'll see more of. But, I think Evanston's approach to affordable housing is multifaceted, and our town is very different in different parts of town in terms of what makes sense. And the accessory dwelling units by right makes sense in my part of town. I think they're a great opportunity to increase affordability, increase the likelihood of people being able to stay in their homes, because that's another issue that is a big deal here, is where, once the kids are gone and people still want to stay, but they just can't sustain it. We have a lot of seniors who are in shared housing arrangements with longtime friends, because that's the way for all of them to stay together and stay in Evanston. So the accessory dwelling unit piece and the work of the people who are trying to figure out how to get those scaled up is very important, and is going to be a big part of what the next mayor and council are going to work on in the next 4 years.
Excellent, Tom. So much appreciate your time today. Best of luck in this re-election campaign. But I know from all of us, we do appreciate your perpetual support and open-mindedness on our issues. Anything else you want to share before you take off?
I just appreciate it, Joe. Thank you. And to your members, thank you so much for all that you do. You are often the canary in the coal mine on issues that get brought to my attention. And it's always, a real good indicator of overall health. If the real estate industry is doing well, generally your city's doing well. And so I just appreciate all that your members do. And Joe, thank you for your kind words as well.
Thank you again, Tom. Take care.
Yeah, take care.
And that does it for this episode of GADcast. If you have questions, comments, or topics you'd like us to discuss, feel free to email me. It's joe@nsbar.org. Until next episode, be well, everyone.